Hi everyone, just here to give you a quick rundown of the risk management system RiskMan. So this is where we record all of our incident reports as well as our feedback and compliments. So I'm just going to show you how to get there. So at the moment you can see our Due to Gala intranet. What you need to do to find RiskMan is to scroll down to Risk Management. Click on that and then click on RiskMan Live Site. This is where you'll log in to complete an incident report. So up here on the left, you'll see a user login. At the moment, it's got my details in there. You would use your employee number at DGAS and then a password. If this is the first time that you'll be using RiskMan, you'll be issued with a password with a capital P. So capital P, ASSWORD. Okay, so that's your password. You'll write those in and you'll click to enter or sign in. If you are using the word password as your password, I know it's confusing, you'll be prompted to change your password. So you'll need to put in the current password, which is password. I promise you I'll stop saying that. And then whatever new password you wish to use. And then obviously write that password again. So I'm just going to turn that off. So you can see now that we have the home page. Now, if you are a personal care assistant, a PCA, you'll go straight to the incident reporting page. As an in charge or someone with a different delegation, you'll come to this home page. So just really quickly, if you want to move your home page around, you can do that by holding down on the blue bits. And you can move things around. So I like to have my incident reports and feedback boxes up the top because this will allow me to go straight to it. You can also see a shortcuts section there where you can click on new feedback or new incident report. So I'm going to go into management, correct that, my workspace, and this is where you will put a new incident report in. So you can see, you click on new and click on incident. Just disregard that page. I've obviously been doing this before. So here we have an incident entry. This is where we report what happened. So as you can see here, it knows who you are. If you've logged in, it'll have your name there as well as your position. You can see that all of our positions are there. If your position is not correct, please let your manager know and they can give us a yell and we can fix that for them. The first question it asks you is, are you reporting this incident on behalf of another staff member, contractor or visitor? The answer is simply yes or no. So if you click no, then we're moving on to the next question. If we click yes, it'll then ask you who are you entering this on behalf of. Now, really simply, you may need to write this incident report on behalf of someone else, particularly if maybe you're a buddy for a student, or maybe we have a volunteer there. So these people can't log in, they don't have an employee number, which means that if something happens for them, you need to fill out that incident report. So that's really important that you do that because we want to capture all that information as well. In this scenario, we'll go with a no. The next question is, have you reported the incident to your manager, supervisor in charge? Obviously, when an incident occurs, it's best practice to report it to somebody. We don't want to rely on verbal reporting as the only answer to our incidents. We need to have evidence. We need to have a written incident report completed as well. So we'll tick yes for that. It then asks us, at this time, was the manager or supervisor in charge an agency staff member? If you were to say yes, because sometimes we do have in charges from an agency, then we can put that person's name in. We obviously would need to start typing that. And what I would suggest as good practice too is that after you've written their name, you would in brackets put, where they were from. Okay. And that would help us to determine who they are and where they're from. So in this scenario, again, we're going to say no. Next, you're asked for the name of the manager or supervisor in question. Now, you can see here there's a drop-down box, but there's also this little dude sitting here. Click on him, and this will allow us to actually go through the list of staff that we have already in the system. So if you don't know their full name, that's okay. If you can't spell their name great, that's okay. We generally just need a few letters of somebody's name. So for argument's sake, I'm going to put my boss's name and that is Danielle. So you can see the more letters I enter, it narrows it down. And there's Danielle. So I'm going to click on her name and Danielle Rose appears there, knows who the person is and what their employee number or name for RiskMan as well. So who or what was affected is our next section. This is where we talk about who was involved. So we have lots of options here. Was it a resident? Was it a community client? Was it a visitor, a staff, a student, a volunteer? Or is it that we're identifying a hazard? We can use any of these for our incident report. And depending on what we choose, it actually changes the face of the incident report. So as you can see, when I tick resident, we have these boxes here. When I change that to be, for example, staff, the look of the page changes. So these yellow lines here, they will come and go depending on how we answer the questions that are presented to us. So for this scenario, I'm going to go with resident because they're our most common incidents, but I please want to stress, if something happens to you as a staff member, or if you witness something happening to a student, or you want to identify a hazard, I'll just show you what happens. If we click hazard, changes the incident script altogether. So all of these things are valid and important and we want you to be reporting them. So we're going to go with resident. I'll just add right now that the yellow lines are mandatory. You have to have some information in there. If you don't, it will not let you submit that report. The white lines, however, you can pick and choose whether you have something in there. It will let you submit a report if you don't have anything in there. So first name, please can I beg you to use capital letters. I've seen far too many incident reports where, John's just written like that. Really, when, we've all been taught that a name of a place, person, always has a capital letter. So we're just going to go with John Green. Just because I can't think of anything else exciting. So our first name is John, our last name is Green, and then we go for the date of birth. So we're going to click on the calendar there, and we're going to, I'll leave it on April. We'll go April the 12th, but obviously our resident wasn't born last week, so, or in April, or in 2020, that's what I'm going for. So we're going to scroll till we find an appropriate date. So let's go about 1942, that seems about right. And then I'll press enter. Oh, that didn't work, did it? Let's try again. 1944, and it's now the 12th. There we go. So the date will be entered that way. Our gender, again, we must respond. Let's go with male. And room number, we're going to go with 43. So as you can see, I'm just putting in details. If you don't know all these details, you'll get them off iCare and you'll get them by asking somebody. Now the incident date, obviously we want incident reports to be written as soon as the incident has occurred, or at least within the first 24 hours. Information will be retained better during that shorter time frame. I have seen incident reports, reported a couple of days, maybe you've gone home off shift and you've thought to yourself, really not sure if I needed to incident report that, and you've come back 2 days later and you thought, yeah, I better report that hazard, or I better, put an incident report in that I knocked, my knee on something. So you need to report it, please do. Don't let that time frame stop you. But obviously we want the smallest time frame possible to, to have all that information retained. So the incident date, just going to go with the 15th of April. The incident time, can you see these little hints with the red line? So basically saying we want a 24-hour clock, but really don't fret if you don't have that, because I'm still going to ask you if it's AM or PM. So as you can see, they're in white, so they're not mandatory, but in saying that, it helps with the incident time being correct. Next section, where did it occur? So we need to know exactly where this happened. So as it involved a resident, we're going to say residential care services. We're then going to say that it happened in Footscray, and the specific location was outside of bedroom 43 in hallway. Please try and be as specific as you can. If it occurred in the bedroom, where? In the ensuite, next to the window, on the bed, where did it occur? Okay, let's be as specific as we can. This next box, what happened, is really important. This is where we're going to give the details of everything that's happened and exactly what we did after it happened and how we supported the resident as well. So over here, you can see the click here to enter incident. This is where we're now able to choose what actually happened. So what category does it fall under? Now, as I said to you, this is about a resident. So these categories are types of incidents that occur for a resident. If we had chosen staff member, those categories are going to be quite different. They're going to be more occupational based categories. And the same thing if it was a hazard, same thing if it was a student or a volunteer. Things will change depending on the type of incident report you're completing. So we're going to go with a fall because they're quite common. We're also going to say that John actually fell outside of his room, but we didn't see it happen. So it was an unwitnessed fall. We could say that he was found on the floor. Actually, we'll go with found on the floor because that alone tells us it was unwitnessed. We can use suspected or unwitnessed as well, but if we're finding him on the floor, then that pretty much tells us that he's fallen over. Where they're going to save and exit. But I just want to show you really quickly that each one of these does open up so we can break it down as to what actually has happened. I'm just going to close these now. Save and exit. All right, now the details of the incident. Now this is really important. You can see on our little hint box here, give a step-by-step detail of the incident. The more information, the better. But please, we do not need a full novel, blow-by-blow description or account. We need to know what happened pertaining to that specific incident. So I don't need to know, I turned up on my shift at 7 o'clock and then I did this and then I did this. Obviously, that's way too much information. We want to know what happened specific to that incident. So I might start by saying, as Writer was attending to morning round or morning ADLs, I should be a bit more precise. Writer found the resident laying on the floor outside of his bedroom. And for more information to help us ascertain exactly what had happened, I might add here that the resident's walker was laying down on the ground, beside him. The resident appeared to be in pain as he was moaning and calling out. So as you can see, I've tried to be quite careful with my language. I use a term like appeared to be in pain because, again, I don't know if he's in pain. He's not actually telling me that he's in pain. But if someone's moaning, laying on the ground, making noises like, oh, help, please help, then obviously they're not comfortable. So I need to be clear with that as well. Now, this is exactly what's happened for that incident. I've walked up, I've seen him on the floor, he's there. This is when we go to our next box and look at the immediate action taken. What did you do at that time straight after the incident? So let's be clear, the incident is finding the person on the floor. This is not normal. Our residents don't go around dragging themselves on the floor. It's not a normal day-to-day occurrence. So what did I do at this time? Obviously, I comforted the resident and told him he was safe. This is really quite an important thing to do, and we forget to do those things. Let me be clear, and I try and be really quite black and white when we talk about incident reporting. Just so you know, the John in my story is fine, he's okay. But what about an occasion where a resident might fall and not be so great afterwards? And worst case scenario, they pass away. If this ends up in a situation where we have people who are really unhappy, who may be looking to blame, it might end up at court, it might end up, you know, in quite a, you know, full-on investigation. I want people to know that I comforted this person, that I assured him that I was safe, that I did everything I needed to do. This is your evidence. This is where you can say exactly what you did immediately at that time. So I comforted the resident, told him he was safe. Writer called for the RN to assess the resident. Writer, I might put a full stop there. I like short and succinct sentences. Writer writer, I'm just trying to think of what I can put here. Followed direction given by the RN to continue to support the resident. After RN assessed the resident and found him well enough to return to his bed, writer used the mobile hoist and with the RN supported the resident to his bed for continued observation. Now, I'm not clinical. I've not written a clinical word in there. I don't know much about OBS and stuff. I just know they need to be taken. So for me, from my stance, I would be writing exactly what I did. The RN can add further information into the incident report to, you know, talk about blood pressure and OBS and injuries and all that sort of stuff. But for now, this is what I'm put in there. And this is enough for us. And as you can see, it hasn't really taken long. Obviously, I'm explaining everything as I go through, using my hands a bit, which you can't see, but hey, that's me. So I just want you to know that this is, it can be simple. We don't need lengthy novels when we're describing an incident. So here we come into some further questions. So did the incident occur during care or service delivery? So obviously, John, from the looks of it, has gotten up out of bed. He's an ambulant resident. He uses a walker. He's quite, you know, able to move from A to B without supervision. So no, there was no care offered at this time because he was just doing his normal routine, you know, moving about, you know, the facility or the home. So we'll put a no there. Has an injury been sustained? Now, if at this point, the RN, obviously in my description, has said that he's fine, he's able to get up and go to his room, he's just slipped and he hasn't hurt himself. So I can put no there. If I don't know, I don't know. So if at this point everything's okay, but there was a bit of bruising or something like that in a different scenario, I can put don't know, not a problem. That can be changed later on, as I said, once the clinical person comes into the report and adds their 2 bobs worth. Now, if there is quite clearly an injury that's been occurred, so you know, John might be bleeding profusely out of his leg, there's a big gash there. So I can then click yes, I come over to the body part affected, click on that box, and I can actually say that yes, on his right thigh, you know, there's a big gash there. So I'm going to click on that bit and I'm going to go save and close, and it's listed there for me. Now, the type of injury, again, I click on that yellow section and I look through for something. So as I keep calling it a gash, it's a cut or a laceration. So I'd click on that. It could be that something appears to be dislocated. Maybe his arms, bent the wrong way, or maybe there's a bone sticking out of something, or maybe someone's fallen with a fork in their hand and that has now ended up in their body. So we've got a foreign body lodged in them. Obviously, I like, a bit of blood and gore. So we'll go with a cut or laceration and say, okay. Okay. So in this instance, though, I've written that he was fine. So I'm going to take those things off. But I just wanted you to see, that that's what happened. Going back to the body too, you can see I've got there the right thigh. If you scroll through here, I might have to go upwards. See there's a tick in that box. So anything I press on here will result in a tick in here. So you could, if you wanted to, scroll through here and tick any box you wanted, which will then highlight the body, or you can do it the other way, up to you. Okay, so I'm going to take away all of my coloured bits so that at least my report looks a bit legit. Take that off, close. I can just do that actually. So if you've made a mistake, you can change that obviously, and it'll still be there, but now I'm saying it's no, so I'm taking it away. Was an ambulance called in this scenario? The answer is no. If I were to say yes, it was, that's fine. As I said, the incident report will change as the questions are answered. So we're going with a no in this scenario. Was the client or resident transferred off site? If I say yes, where did they go? Okay, were they gone to hospital? Did they go somewhere else? So again, you can see that the incident report's changing. Next of kin notified. If I say yes, it'll ask for further information. Now, for me right now as a PCA or whatever role I'm playing, if it's not my job to call that next of kin, I'm going to say no. And then if or when the other person, the RN or the in charge or whoever comes through and adjusts this, they can then change that information. GP notified, we're going to go with a no. And were the police notified? As I said, if any of these boxes is a yes, there'll be more information asked for. Has a record of the incident been included in the progress notes? Yes, certainly. We would need to report things in the progress notes, and I might simply put that John had a fall or was found on the floor. Please see incident report number and whatever number I get for this. Or I can do even more information. I can copy and paste what's on here, so I can copy and paste that into a Word document and then use that for my progress notes, however you'd like to do it. Now, this box is quite important, initial severity. If we click on this, this tells us how severe an incident is. We do not need you to guess at this point, okay? Someone falling isn't great, but in John's scenario, he wasn't hurt. He was able to get up, lay in bed for a little while and then go about his day. So it's certainly not catastrophic. It may not, it's not even major, and I'll explain why. So you can see that in each of these, there is the categories listed. So number 1 happens to be fall because it was at the top of the list when we went to the categories. So a minor fall is found on floor with no injury or a near miss. So the fall was prevented by staff or others. Now, John was actually found on the floor with no injury, so he would fall into a minor severity. But if we look at moderate, it's now a fall with an injury requiring medical treatment. However, it's not a fracture. A major fall is resulting in a fracture and or transfer to hospital, and this includes suspected fractures. A catastrophic fall is one that causes permanent injury or, heaven forbid, a death of a resident. So this is where you need to make sure you're actually reading this. You're not just making an assumption, gee, this looks really bad, I'm going to go for catastrophic. Whichever column you pick, this will then determine who is notified about this incident. Okay, so something that's catastrophic would go right up to the CEO. We're looking at our general managers, that sort of thing. Obviously, I don't want you to be scared and think, oh, I don't want the CEO to know about this. but we need to ensure that we're reporting as required because it does have a flow-on effect. So in this instance, as I said, John's incident was minor. So I just have to click anywhere in that column and it'll take it over there for me. Now, the next box is suggestions to prevent reoccurrence of this type of incident. That could be, you know, John wasn't wearing any shoes, he only had socks on. So a suggestions might be that, you know, John's reminded that shoes would keep him safer when he's walking around the facility. It's just a suggestion. You may not have anything that you can think of, so you can leave that blank. Were there any witnesses? In this scenario, we're going to say no. If you say yes, again, boxes appear. Who were they? So we would get the person's name and what their role is. We're going to go with no because, you know, we're saying that no one saw it. So now because we've chosen fall, we have an extra box that's purely about falls. Okay, so what we need to make sure here is that we're actually understanding what the question is asking so that we can respond to it appropriately. First question, what was the resident's mobility status prior to the fall? So John is quite, as I said, capable of walking. He has a walking frame, but he's able to walk, he's able to wait there and do those sorts of things. So we would label him, not that I like labels, but as ambulant. Now, where did the fall occur, or the location of the fall? So we're saying that it occurred outside of his bedroom in a corridor. What was the activity at the time? What was John doing? So he was actually ambulant, he was walking. What was the assistance that was being given at the time of the fall? So John wasn't receiving any assistance. He's able to, as I said, walk freely around the facility. So no assistance. Obviously you can see there 1 staff assist, 2 staff assist, supervision only, family, others, etc. It's important that you use the right one. We're talking about at the time of the fall, not generally. I need to be really clear here. If John, for example, was a supervision, he required supervision when he was walking, and you know full well that he wasn't receiving that supervision at that time, please do not panic. This is not a time to fib, this is a time to tell the truth. We just need to write exactly what happened because we can't change things now. It's happened. We need to make sure that people are doing the right thing. So if we weren't, this is the only way we are going to learn. Next question, were hip protectors required according to the resident care plan? Yes, no, don't know. We're going to put no in this instance. It's a strange question because it doesn't always work in every scenario. If the person does require hip protectors, you can put yes. If they, and in that scenario, it'll ask you, were they on? The fall might have been at 2 in the morning and they didn't need the hip protectors. It's a strange question to put in, but yeah, just answer it as with the knowledge that you know, or yeah, as best as you can. So what footwear was the resident wearing at the time of the fall? So I'm going to put that he had shoes on. I know up above I said, you know, one of the suggestions could be that, you know, he might not have been wearing shoes, but if he wasn't wearing shoes, I would like to think that we would have that in the scenario there. Does the resident have a sensor mat? We're going to say no, because as I said, John's quite able to get up out of bed and, you know, wander freely. How were you alerted to the fall? That's a drop-down box. We've got sensor mat, call bell, visual observation, other person, or noise, resident calling out. So we're going to go visual observation because we found him. Now, this is one of those tricky questions. Was manual handling equipment in use at the time? So I need to be clear here. The answer is no if you find a resident laying on the floor. If you find a resident, you know, halfway out of their bed, the answer is still no. The only time you would say yes in this scenario is if you were actually using a machine of some sort or slide sheets. Okay, so in this scenario, John was not dropped. We weren't transferring him from A to B and he then fell. Okay, he was ambulant, he was walking. So the answer in this scenario is no. I need to be really clear with that because we have had some issues. Final question, was the resident using a mobility aid at the time? Yes, he was, and he was using his walking frame with wheels. So you can see there's lots of options. Gutter frame, wheelchair without motor, wheelchair with motor, motorised scooter, walking frame without wheels, with wheels, walking stick or crutches. So he's got his walking frame with wheels. As a PCA, that is the end of my incident report. I would not see any of these green bits, but obviously I'm a bit more, well, I'm a different kind of special to a PCA in real life. So for me as a RiskMan teacher and admin, I get to see lots of bits and pieces. So at this point, if you are an RN or you're an in charge, EN in charge or RN in charge or PCA team leader, you'll most likely be able to see most of this section. This means that you'll have to perform some form of preliminary investigation, and we'll be able to go through that in a different training session. But the same deal applies. White boxes are not mandatory. Once I start investigating, this changes from a pending to an open. I'll leave it as pending at this point. Yeah, so you just fill out bits and pieces as it arises. We can add additional notes, but we'll go through that in a different training session. So finally, what we have down the bottom here is how do we then submit this form so that it goes to where it needs to go. We have two options, submit and clone and submit. I need to be really clear because we have had some issues around this section. Where this incident report is pertaining to just one person, it's just about John. All I need to do is report that John has had a fall and John is now okay. So I can now submit that by pressing the submit button. It'll then give me a incident report number that I can then use for my progress notes and for further reporting if I need to. What I might just do here, just change that to test just so I can submit it. So we'll press submit there. Now, submit and clone, popular this afternoon. This is where we would use it if we had more than one resident, or we may have a resident and a staff member involved. An example might be, you know, Mr. John Green, he didn't have a fall today. He actually was involved in an altercation with another resident. So John and George were in a bit of a scuffle, an argument, and things got a bit heated. So I then have to do an incident report about that. Now, I would do my first incident report for John. I'd fill out all of the details for him, exactly what happened during that incident, the immediate action I took, you know, about those two residents. Please be mindful that I would probably write the incident with resident J and resident G as opposed to their first names, and then, you know, add all the details as required. I would then submit and clone, and this will then give me an incident report number for the first resident. I then go back into the second incident report and change the details for the second resident. So your service, your date, your time, your type, everything would remain the same except for your resident's details. I could then change, you know, the resident to George Blue, his date of birth, his details. Once I've finished that, his second one, I would then press the submit button. Now, this is telling me that I've failed to complete all the mandatory fields. So I'm going to return to the form and find which bit's flashing red. Usually tells me. What haven't I done? Can you see? Oh, maybe because I've got all my green bits showing with nothing on them. That's fine. We would press submit. it would then have submit the form now. Any required email notification will be sent. So I'm saying it's completed all the mandatory fields required. Oh, maybe that's what it said before. I'm tired, guys. So we press submit. And now it'll tell me my incident number is 1095. My report will be displayed as a PDF if I want to print it out. So you can print out, particularly if the incident report is about you. If it's a staff related incident and you wanted to keep a copy of that, you could print it out. And also for me, obviously, being that I am an admin for RiskMan, I'll probably see bits and pieces that you will never see. So, which is fine. Believe me, you don't want to see all the other bits and pieces. Okay. So that's what happens to your incident report. Please remember that if you want to complete a new incident report, you go to new and it's new incident, and that'll take you to a fresh one, and you'll start filling that out. Lastly, I want to show you quickly the feedback section. So I'll go new feedback. Again, disregard that because I've been playing around with it. This is where we're able to enter any compliment, any complaint, suggestion or query. Again, the same thing occurs here. Any white boxes are not mandatory, so we can put something in if we want to without having to fill it out. This form can be used in place of the OTC, the green forms. So if a resident's family member wants to make a complaint, and obviously we take complaints seriously, you can gather as much information as you want, and then we would expect you to fill this out. They may fill out a green form and hand it to you. We want that information put onto a feedback entry form in RiskMan. So as I said, it again will ask you particular questions, you know, where is this coming from, what service, what department. I'll just show you here, if we're looking at residential, it then says, you know, which facility, and then the department will be any of those departments. So nursing, lifestyle, laundry, environmental, etc., etc. So it's a little bit different to an incident report. The big deal here is, does the person providing feedback wish to remain anonymous? So if we say yes, all of that goes away. So a person making a complaint or even giving, you know, compliments may not want to be named. So we can always help them to remain anonymous. If they say no, I want the manager to know it was me, then we'll ask for some information. So basically we'll be looking for first and last name, and then a contact number and preferred mode of contact. In here, obviously, we're asking for address and gender and email, but we don't have to have that information, hence why they're white. Does the feedback relate to a patient or client? Yes, no. And then our key date. So we've got a date here of when it's entered into RiskMan. We want to know what date it was received, and the date that we acknowledged it. So it's really important that, you know, if I send an email in as a compliment or a complaint, that someone responds to me in due time with, you know, at least a minimum response. Again, we submit and clone, and we submit unless there's more than one resident or more than one staff or more than one issue. We only ever submit the incident. Please don't press submit and clone if you don't require that second incident report or that second feedback form. Okay, folks, I hope you got all that. There's a lot to take in. Obviously, I did a lot of talking. If you need any further assistance, you can contact or speak to your manager. You can speak to your admin staff. We do have RiskMan champions throughout each facility. You should be able to find out who they are. Worst case scenario, give L&D a call and we can help you. Bye.